So I had a colorful, I guess, 20-year career with Siemens through acquisitions. I got out of college as a mechanical engineer, and I said I'd never want to work for a big company. So I started with a little software startup that was about 150 people. And we were bought. I went through like 7 acquisitions. And in 2007, when Siemens decided they wanted to be a software company, a software facing company, they bought us as their PLM vendor.
Okay.
So I've been in the PLM space for 20 plus years. And I spent, so 2007 till 2016, I think I left Siemens and went to a startup before this one that got me back into that small. I finally was like, I can't take the big company thing. It was great, but I wanted to get back into some smaller, innovative
Was
stuff.
the 7 acquisitions something that made you richer and richer and richer and richer? Not so.
I started when I have 4 kids. I'm always broke. I mean, it's always.
No, I get that. I get that. I thought maybe after the first 3 or 4 acquisitions, you were like, you know what, honey, let's have a 4th kid. We can afford it now.
Yeah, no, a lot of those were through like when they're trying to consolidate some of the PLM vendors, like EDS was one of the acquisitions that came in, and they bought Unigraphics and SDRC, 2 big PLM vendors. They pulled them together. So we were under the EDS umbrella for a while, and they spun us off to private equity. And then Siemens finally bought us in 2007. And Siemens is a great home.
Folks at Propel, I'm friendly with them.
Propel, yeah, Propel PLM.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're based off Salesforce, right? They have the Salesforce platform.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I talked to those guys a number of years ago.
As potential partners?
No, we were talking about maybe I was kind of interested, maybe going over there. I was looking at their technology and what they're doing. I thought they were a very interesting company, and they still are. They're very relevant. They got a different approach, which I respect what they're doing over there.
Okay. How robust is the PLM space? Because I'll tell you, the only times I've heard it brought up in my community is when I bring it up, because I have somebody in the PLM space who has something relevant to say, and yet it doesn't seem to attract a big enough audience, or they don't really get it, or do I really need this? Could you explain PLM to us in a way laymen can understand?
Yeah, so PLM is, there's usually a couple enterprise systems in large corporations. There's an ERP system, and then they'll have some type of PLM platform. And that's kind of your overall BOM strategy, whether it's from your CAD design,
just in case
design.
there are some folks who don't know, PLM is product lifecycle management.
Product lifecycle management, yeah. So it's think of it as like deployment numbers. You're deploying anywhere between 20,000 to 80,000 seats in the company. It's a very, very large deployment. And they talk about the single source of truth, and that's really in the early conceptual stages through product launch and even post-launch. So it's managing the product aspect. So I think early on, you're talking about requirements, early conceptual systems design. That's all kind of started in PLM, and you enrich that BOM and the material over time. So it does all your CAD management, requirements management, electrical software design. It's all falls under this PLM umbrella. So
it sounds like a place where all of your other software integrates into it, and it's kind of the motherboard of all system software.
Yeah. And so I guess this is a relevant topic. So 2008, I think I was managing some business at our Ford account, and Ford, they have an ECU, right? And what they were doing is
ECU is
electronic control unit. So it's the computer, one of the 20 to 100 computers that are in the vehicle, right? And in that computer, that little box, the black box, has some electrical components in it, and then it's got some software that's on there. And the way they released those things was it was really a black box release. It was a version of that product. They couldn't really decouple the hardware from the software. They just knew what was put on the truck. So what they have to do in service is they have to take the whole black box out and put a new one in where they knew the version of software. So if they had to do a software upgrade, they had to replace the whole thing, which is a few $100s to do that repair. So they said, let's find a way to decouple hardware from software and actually manage the whole SBOM. And that's kind of how I got into this space with cybersecurity. But we created the first release system for the SBOM at Ford.
Another acronym.
The software bill of material.
Thank you. I thought so, but I wasn't sure.
No, good catch.
I have to watch you.
Yeah, you do. I use a lot of that's the problem with being in here so long, is you get stuck on these terms, but thanks for calling them out. So we were able to decouple the software from the hardware. So now when a vehicle came in for service, they'd know not only which hardware was in the vehicle, but which software release was on there. So they could just flash or just do a software upgrade into the vehicle through
Mhm.
USB or whatever it was. So
Mhm.
that whole SBOM concept it's been a very relevant topic, and it's in medical, it's a huge topic today. But that's one of the aspects of PLM was just the hardware and the software being independent, but then we look at a systems level. So now is each ECU, each like a braking function will have some like microcontrollers, very small computers, the actual brakes. But that's talking back to some centralized ECU getting signals from it. So then how do you manage the whole system of systems, right? All
So
the
is the in
ECUs.
PLM, is the P always software, really?
No, it's products. So it's the hardware. It's managing the design of that brake, the actual the physical, the structural. It's looking at the design of the brake, what it looks like, but then it's looking at the friction wear of the brake. It's looking at this whole CAE, the computer aided, the CAE aspect of it, which is like the wear and tear. It's doing analysis on how long that brake will last. It's doing all that stuff, right? It's doing everything in a virtual world that you're going to see on a vehicle in the physical world, right? So even crash tests, PLM manages the like crash tests. So you see those cars hitting the crash mules, they simulate that on computers, right? You can see the whole thing, crash zones crumble and everything in a virtual world. That whole process is part of PLM.
Years ago, and I still struggle with this from time to time, and maybe it was just 2 years ago, the last time I had my conference before COVID had other plans. I struggle with, for medical device startups, what comes first? Is it your marketing research? Is it having a regulatory pathway to get through FDA? Is it quality? Is it this? Is it that? We go through all these things. And my presenter, who, when we were having this conversation, had just finished a presentation on quality. And I was like, wow, it really sounds like quality is the place we have to start. We're talking about life-saving devices. We can't compromise on that. And I said, but as a marketer, I have to think that marketing comes first, because if I don't understand what my consumer needs, then I don't have a product in the first place. As I think about all, as you'll appreciate, all of the expenses that go into making a class 2 device, say, for example, and a startup, and you introduce this concept of PLM, do you know how many things I have to do? I have to clinical trial, I have to prototype, I have to, all of these things. When would somebody think about PLM? Practically, I'm sure the PLM people would be like, oh, you got to start there. Okay. But do we all need one? Really? Is it imperative? Because more companies than not that I speak with, and I tend to speak with smaller, Siemens isn't getting me on the phone, but it's smaller, 100 million or less in business. They're just kind of getting started. They don't have PLM systems, and I don't know what they're missing.
Let's decouple the technology from the process. They're all doing PLM, right? And they may be doing that through complex Excel spreadsheets, managing which products and which versions are going to market. Somewhere you're tracking the requirements of what you're building, to the design itself, to the testing of that, to any regulatory compliance. Like there's some type of, connect the dots, and that's PLM is just the elaborate software that manages that process. So
everyone does it, even if it's on a piece of paper.
You have to, even if you're just a startup and you're trying to get your first product to market, you're managing the life cycle of that product, so that if they come back and audit you, or you have to do your submission for FDA pre-submission, you have a document that goes back to a specific version of a product that's got history and revision, everything else. That's the process of PLM, right? Now, whether you're going to go out and deploy a full-blown system like a Siemens or a PTC, or the other vendors out there, maybe that is for some of the larger companies, but even the small startups are using somebody. And I know for a fact a lot of the vendors, like a PTC, has a startup program where they get you in and they can get you working in a platform that's matched, I guess, financially to the markets they're serving.
I'm going to bring my friend Jonathan on. I'm going to bring Eddie back and ask them how they manage their product life cycles, because they're both at younger companies.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Let's see where Jonathan is today. half the time he is in the middle of a walk somewhere in balmy Southern California. Well, in the meanwhile, while we're here he comes. Mr. Saul, good morning. He's just released a product that's deep in the COVID testing space.
Good time for him.
Yeah. Can you unmute, Jonathan, or are you? There we go. I know I usually get like you're on your way out, and it's going to be. Look at his blue sky.
Oh, looks just like Detroit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like Seattle.
Yeah. Well, yeah. No, we're very interested in this topic because the subject is very, very critical because consumers are demanding to have diagnostic as a service. We see that the privacy, the risk management, and all sorts of other types of manipulations or data capture, and even just internal working with vendors, there's so many parties that come together to actually make a product these days that you have all of these touch points that are quite critical.
Is that, I mean, he kind of talked about cybersecurity and product lifecycle management in the same sentence. Is that as fluid as it was for you to go from PLM to a focus of cybersecurity, John?
Yeah, so the unique thing about Cybellum and kind of how I ended up here is they approached me and I was unsure. I don't have a cyber background. I've got a PLM background and kind of been on the outskirts of cyber. And once we started talking about their approach and their thought process being around cyber being more than a scanning, looking for like get an SBOM, get the vulnerabilities, it's a report, it's done. They wanted to talk about the life cycle of cybersecurity, and that's what really made sense to me. So the way we view it is it's a thread, just like your CAE or your any of your existing, like let's say requirements management or
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't
your
think of it
materials management, whether using hazardous materials, how the life cycle of that is. Product security is the same way, which means the platform itself that we have needs to be integrated into existing PLM systems like PTC, Windchill, or Siemens, or Aris. It has to be integrated in the CI/CD process. So like your Azure suite. So the tools that the software developers are in, we have to be integrated into that suite as well. Ticketing systems of, there's a ticket that needs work done on the SBOM. We need to integrate with that. So we can't be a standalone, scan and report mechanism anymore. We need to be a integrated thread that fits into your whole business. And that's really the way Cybellum went to market, which made sense to me with my background. So they brought the cyber side of it and I kind of brought the PLM side of it. And it's been a fun journey. Kind of looking at how these two things, and believe me, we're not done yet. We're trying to figure out with some of our customers how you integrate these things so it is a seamless process that your product security people are now part of the mainstream development streams, and they're all part of the same release process, gate processes, etc.
I think you hit the nail on the head by bringing it back to core product management, and taking that leadership and saying this is part of the product. And incorporating all of those things along the way. It also allows your you don't want to have, parallel running development teams, but that's kind of what takes place where there's God's law and there's man's law. And, the engineers and the guys who are dealing with the physical stuff are dealing with, this, no matter how many bodies you throw at it, it's going to take a certain amount of time. Whereas software, you can throw a lot of resources and accelerate time. And that's where I think we get a lot of disconnect, because people in that space, they live in those accelerated timeframes, and that creates a conflict because the hardware doesn't naturally move any quicker if you throw more bodies at it. And
that's-
only product
yeah.
management thinking is going to be able to distinguish and see those two things in place, and then say, you know, do we move that far forward in this work stream, knowing that, you know, we might have 3-4 steps, you know, or even further steps ahead from the rest of the team. And what can we do during that time that will be valuable? Or do we spend those resources iterating and hard testing and putting up those, you know, do we do a SOC 2 test? Do we do some other type of test to make sure that we're not, that the walls that we've put up actually work? So I think it's great to see it from a product management perspective.
I have a lot of thoughts and questions. I'm just kind of ambiently familiar with some of the cybersecurity firms out there. And I would ask you, John, what is your value proposition that differentiates you from other people with the cybersecurity shingle on there?
So there's a couple. I would say the most prominent is what kind of we talked about. It's a platform to manage the life cycle. Cybersecurity in the past has been treated as kind of a scanning event, point in time. You scan it, you get the report, you feed that back, and you're kind of done. And it happens at the very end of the life cycle. It's been also sold that way, where people buy the number of scans. So a customer is going to say, I want to buy 100 scans for the year. I'm going to use those as easily as I can right at the end of the life cycle, right before the product's released, and I'm going to let it go. Where we do it differently, we built off of a cyber digital twin. So we even take our license strategy to be a life cycle event where you pay for that twin and you can scan it as often as early as you want. So we promote scanning left, move everything shift left, and scan early and scan often. So the idea that our core knowledge is built off of a cyber digital twin with a life cycle, right? That's I would say the first thing.
And you say that your competitive set doesn't do that. So I mean, so two of the names that I know, because they're in the news a lot, are Palantir and CrowdStrike. They are not PLM companies. They are all about cybersecurity, is my understanding, protecting your assets from attack.
Yeah, and that's actually let's take a pause on that comment right there, because cybersecurity is a lot of things, right? It's network security. It's, you know, listening devices that are on products in the field. I just want to kind of put out where we are as a company, because we've got a slice of cybersecurity, right?
Yes.
We are a product cybersecurity company, and we are working off-board. So we have got nothing on the device itself or on a server or on a mobile app. We're off-board. We're part of think as you're developing software, you release a binary. That's our core asset. We take your release binary and we create an SBOM from that, and that's what we manage. So we're very good with the embedded space, so embedded firmwares, that type of stuff. We do that, plus the mobile app that's attached to it if you have one, and any backend server application. So a digital twin of the product itself and all the components that touch it, right? So we're not in the data path either. So we're not listening to any data coming between. We're kind of an offboard, persistent, looking in the life cycle of it. So I just want to make sure that's clear. So there's competitors to us are like older technologies, are like Synopsys Black Duck is one that's been out there, you know, an SCA tool. There's some other startups like Vado was bought by JFrog. That's another kind of competitor to us. That's the space that we sit in.
So I think you, from a marketing perspective, you raise an interesting point that if you accept the premise that I'm at least as bright as the average person, an assumption I grant you, about cybersecurity, that's a big word. We think about getting hacked. And who's going to, you know, hack our insulin pump and kill people. How knowledgeable is the medical device space in general? I suspect not very, about all of the types of cybersecurity slices about which you speak. And, you know, if I have to worry about something, is it going to be John's slice or these other things? I'm simply too ignorant to know all of the cybersecurity things. So for that to be your banner, that's why I said something as ignorant as, oh, you mean like Palantir? Like what? That's government defense, you know, this, like all this other stuff. how do you're too small to educate the category. So how do you have I know you're not the marketing guy, but you've done a fair amount of sales, and I don't know what the structure is, but what's that plan look like?
From to kind of reach our target market,
To have them understand why they need what you do relative to cybersecurity.
So
You follow my
sorry,
question? It's okay.
I do.
Is that one of your 4 children attracting your attention? A dog?
I did get a text message from one of them, and they're all running around the house here.
Okay.
So we go to market in specific verticals. Let me just start there first. We did automotive, and we're in the med device space, and those are our 2 big verticals.
Okay.
If you look at, and here's how we kind of help position ourselves.
Yeah, you're welcome to share your screen if you like.
I'm just going to pull up one quick slide here.
Yeah, sure. Anything that helps tell your story works for me. There you go.
You could see this.
Yep.
So when you look at the FDA pre-submission document, right, for med devices, they specifically call out, this whole cybersecurity space. They talk about a life cycle event from concept to final decommissioning and disposable. This cyber bill of materials, both the static and dynamic code analysis. This is language right out of the spec itself, and that's what we provide. So we usually try and align ourselves right there, because this is the relevant language and the things that they're trying to respond to, right?
Now, do you have a good sense of how many competitors you have talking about this slide in their presentations? This is what you need. This is what we do.
They're going to be more talking about, I guess, these 2 right here. Probably, the Lifecycle platform is really, it's really kind of unique to us. You're not going to see a lot of people in our space that we're in that are integrating into PLM platforms. That's really not where they came from. They're more integrated in the software lifecycle. So the CI/CD process, they're going to be in that space, but they're not going to be really in the bigger hardware, software, electronic release process, the whole big picture, if that makes sense.
So I have a question for you. As I'll use a parallel industry, security cameras. For years, security cameras had their own technology, their own testing, their own cybersecurity. It's all integrated into their onboard chips. And now you have company after company completely agnostic about what kind of hardware is being used, because all they want to do is grab the data and then process it on their servers and then give the output to the person who actually wants it. And I think medical devices will, or certain types of medical devices will move into that direction where you won't have, it'll be more about the data and processing the data and less about the actual data capture object. And how are you going to move and compete when groups like CrowdStrike will be in a very, very strong position because they're used to handling the broader ecosystem of cybersecurity?
So that's a good point. So, and then I believe I've got the position right. CrowdStrike is in kind of the incident response. It's in the data path. It's once a product's in the field, it's out there doing the monitoring and response to that, which we actually come in before you get the product to market. And so what we're trying to do is reduce the risk that there is an incident that CrowdStrike is going to pick up at the end. The other part that you mentioned there is the supply chain for these products is so diverse now, where, let's say I'm a major medical provider like a Medtronic, they've got such a integrated supply, a large supply chain where they're getting hardware, they're getting software from second, third tier people. The product they're putting in the market, they may not know everything that's on there. They're just putting it out to the market. Where we come in, that final software build that's being put onto that product, we scan that and we can do it, and we extract the software bomb and the hardware bomb, so we can give you what's going into that product, so you can look at what are the vulnerabilities that are attached to this SBOM, both known and unknown. We can look at policy compliance or secure coding standards and rate that final build that you're going to put out there to see if it's compliant with what you're trying to put to market. So we try and catch it before it gets out there. So at least you know your vulnerability path, right? You know what's going out there and you can remediate that.
So
we don't need,
are you seeing higher demand from traditional, not just device, but also in the robotics field, where they really do piece together 50, 60 different components from all sorts of different players, and it's a plug and play assembly?
Yeah, so we do a lot in that space as well, and that's kind of, the more complex the systems get, the more value you get out of the platform. So if you're using a decent compute platform with a basic OS, like an operating system, and then you're developing code on top of that, now you've got a bunch of open source code, you've got code that you've written, you've got third-party code. When you can get a single view of that whole BOM, of everything in there, now you've got some clarity into what I'm going to market with. So, robotics is, it's a very complex system. And then I touched a little bit earlier about the systems of systems. So now you've got multiple, like, let's say there are multiple PLCs that are moving multiple motors in there. How do you look at the vulnerabilities across the whole system, right? What's in there that an attacker could penetrate or could expose later on, and what's my risk there? So we do.
So ultimately, that's part of your value proposition as the markets are moving to more complex systems, more integration with smart technologies, smartphones, tertiary suppliers of various things, or multiple supply chain controls. You are able to test and integrate for all of those types of things, and then work with the evolution digitally as things evolve, because there's tons and tons of iterative improvements as technology moves faster and faster.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. I do think there's some things on your presentation that might be clarifying for us, if you want to bring that back. Up to you, of course. I don't know the content, but as you can see, given the kinds of questions that we're asking, we were.
Let me bring this back up. Let me just put this in.
Of course, we don't need to, see the whole thing. If that's just,
no,
you can jump around to whatever slides will help us follow. Because ultimately, what I'd like is I'd like to be able to share this presentation with people who may not realize, don't know what they don't know, and why they would need to think right now about what it is that you're offering.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I can just kind of high level, we'll just run through some of these slides and fire away.
Let's focus on the medical one, and let's dive in.
The three, and this whole thread, you'll see the slide deck is all about the center vertical medical, but those are our 2 or 3 go-to-market strategies. Mm-hmm. So we start with medical, and why do we go actually into the verticals we're in? Automotive was kind of the start back in 2016. Medical today is the most heavily breached industry, right? The sector. So all the cyber attacks are focused on medical for these reasons.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think the bottom right here is 10 to 40 times more valuable of getting.
Oh, it's about our healthcare records.
It's about getting your records. It's about being able to submit false claims and people getting medical coverage and bypass the system under someone else's identity. So it's very valuable. And then it's also I don't think I have the slide here, but it's very easy today to have a denial of service or get personal information and then to get paid. Right, with Bitcoin and everything else you can get today, it's very easy for the attackers to get paid. And whether you're a device manufacturer or healthcare provider, I think we've got another slide that shows that the cost of an attack, they're willing to pay the 100 grand or 200 grand, whatever someone's asking, to get the services turned back on, because they're so reliant on their digital services that stopping their service for any point in time, they're so heavily invested in the revenue streams that come from digital services. They'll pay the fee to get it turned back on, even from denial of service. So medical is easy to attack because if you look at the number of connected devices in a hospital, it's astronomical. So there's so many paths to get in, and then it's easy to get paid, right? So they'll pay the money, so they don't get the PR about it. They don't have any issues. So it's 85,000 connected devices in the hospital from an average. Just think about how many ways you can get in.
And
It's crazy.
by connected, we can assume that each of them is talking directly to my healthcare record. It has to be documented in with what's happening with this patient.
It could be anywhere. I mean, that's one of the sources they can get back to, but I mean, it could be a personal, where they come in, there's attacks on personal healthcare like pacemakers, and people have a mobile device and they can get attacked through the Bluetooth on their phone to get into the pacemaker background.
Where's the money in that? Besides just scaring the shit out of everyone and making us pay, please don't do that. Is that it? To me, I'm like, who's going to kill? Who wants to? I mean, I suppose there are a number of people, Jonathan included, who would like to see me dead. But
I think there's very few people that are malicious in it, but they know they're going to pay. Right? They know someone's going to pay because of the PR, of the potential of a denial of service. It's the what could happen, right? No one wants it to happen. So, it's like the automotive industry. Are people going to take over vehicles and start crashing them into walls? I highly doubt it. But they might shut a fleet down that's supposed to go out for the day, right? It's sitting in a yard ready to go out for the day, and they're going to dispatch vehicles, and they just won't leave, right? It's not that they're going to maliciously hurt somebody; they're just going to stop the service.
Okay.
So there's a lot of money in this space, and there's a lot of ways to get in there. So you've got that. Then anytime you've got this high exposure, you start getting more and more, attention from the regulatory bodies. So you've got the existing standards that are out there, like the FDA standards, but you've also got this administration, and you see all the emphasis now on cybersecurity that's duly needed, at least in the US, saying that we have to have a better view of the cyber health of things because we're getting these hacks, like the pipeline attacks and everything else we're seeing.
Do you have
medical being one of the focuses?
Do you guys keep an active list as points of evidence to help tell your story about? Here's a list of all of the medical devices that you might not even are aware have been attacked, and you don't want to add your name to that list, kind of thing, because most of the ones that I'm aware of have been hospital systems, and frankly, there's just so much news to keep in your head that it's almost like forgive the analogy, but it's like, oh, did we have a mass shooting today? Okay, I don't know, which one are you talking about? Like, I can't. So I hear like cybersecurity issue. I'm like, okay, but are there that many in medical device that you can say you simply got to, or is it just the threat of it potentially coming?
No, we've got, I don't know how comprehensive list is. We've got a list of the announcements. A lot come through like FDA and some reporting mechanisms that it'll come through the researcher. Right, a researcher comes and they'll submit to a major med device that they have been able to create an attack path to their devices. So there's been no compromise, been no anything else, but that is put out there. It's released to the public so that anybody using that same software stack or have those same CVEs or vulnerabilities in their product, they know to go patch those. They know it's a exploitable documented attack path now. So those are pretty well kept. But hopefully by doing some of the stuff we're doing, we eliminate the need to get that far, right? We try and expose that stuff early. Now, if you have this digital twin that we have that knows all the vulnerabilities in your product, there's an attack out there and you're notified that, let's say they were able to penetrate one of your competitive products, or someone penetrated and exploited a CV that's in your product. We can then tell you where that is in all your products under management. So we can say, these are all the products affected by this published exploit that's out there. So instead of having to go kind of search and see, okay, does this affect us? And if it does, where? We can tell you immediately as it comes in, it affects you. Here's all the products and here's everything's affected.
When you keep a digital twin, if my twin gets attacked, can you swap it out where the healthy twin gets put in its place, or am I thinking about it wrong?
You're thinking about it a bit wrong in the sense that the twin we have is just the full software bomb and hardware bomb of what you put in the field, right? So it's a static version of that.
Right.
Where the twin is version is if you make an upgrade to the software in the field or the
We
hardware,
have a backup.
it wouldn't be a backup. It's just showing here's the system of record of what went out now, right? Here's what's out in the field now. So we don't necessarily swap it out. There's somebody in the software development thread that's going to create a new version of the product,
Mm-hmm.
and that'll be pushed through like an OTA system, over the air updates, or you know,
Mhm.
someone's going with the USB port.
Mhm.
We would just have a record of what's being pushed out there.
Okay.
We're not
So
running anything. We're not running anything on our end that's controlling anything in the field.
can you help? I slipped into something there that's like an obvious mistake for you, but help me distinguish between a digital twin and a backup. Because you're taking a point in
okay.
time of like, I just backed up my hard drive. There it is. If it crashes, I still have it. And I know it's a different purpose, but in effect, isn't it a backup?
No, because your hard drive is actually running. It's running your computer, or it's controlling your data, right? It's actually performing a function. Our twin, let's say it is it's looking at all the from a hard drive perspective, be looking at all the vulnerabilities that could attack your hard drive. Of all the software running on there, we can tell you what's vulnerable in that hard drive. So we're not running anything.
A backup is just a dummy sitting over there in case.
Yeah. So
but yours has this function that it can understand what happened and how it will apply to you. Now,
exactly.
You would want to do that with your twin because you wouldn't do it on the live system? Like,
so that's a different field. In the live system, you're actually installing some type of agent that may be listening or looking for irregular traffic patterns. A lot of this,
right, that's where like a CrowdStrike is protecting you from an attack.
So now you're in service, right? You're in service, and you have that on the device, looking at network traffic, that kind of stuff. Again, we're before you get that far during the life cycle, you need to be looking at what could happen out there, and continuously trying to evolve the product to be more and more secure. So by the time it gets out there, hopefully there's less chance of anything happening that would CrowdStrike ever pick up.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm wondering now if my ignorant questions are the kinds that you typically field, or are the people with whom you're engaging already so much more knowledgeable than I that my questions are ridiculously amateurish? Because I'm thinking you're going to encounter somebody like me in marketing or product management who doesn't have your background, and it's like, oh, you mean like that? Like, do you have it broken down to neophytes like me that's like, oh, I understand it. Oh my God, yes, please, John, we need that. Because I'm still, I don't feel like I could leave this conversation and go call up a friend and be like, I just talked to John Auld, and I don't know if you have this, but you got to call this guy. I don't understand that yet.
No, this conversation is actually, it's a great learning experience for me, because it takes me back to when I first came to Cybellum. I was in the same boat you were, where I didn't really understand product cybersecurity, first of all, and then the specific niche of product cybersecurity. I had a lot of the exact same questions, and you bring up a good point that we should probably have maybe even a broader positioning space to show the different areas of cybersecurity, and then specifically where we fit in.
Yeah.
Our typical interaction now is with someone with a title like product security architect,
right.
product
Like
security
they're
analyst,
completely in the same journals and they understand the nuances.
Yeah. Now that doesn't take
and maybe that's enough.
That
you don't need to appeal to the Joe Hages who don't know what you're talking about.
I would question that, though, because we're trying to kind of redefine how companies think about product cybersecurity as this PLM thread, right? So we do address like a CISO that has so much stuff under his umbrella that this is, again, a very small. He'd ask a lot of the same questions you're asking, I'm sure. So it would come from a different, broader space. Now, the industries and the customers that we talk to, a lot of times they'll even have a chief product security officer. So that person, like this material fits exactly their background, their understanding.
Mhm.
Someone who's got a broader, there's IT security, there's, all the IT systems that run, like that's not us, that those are things that we kind of probably view the higher level and show here's all the aspects of cybersecurity from penetration testing. That again, that's not us. There's a lot of things that we don't do, but from a product development standpoint, in that product thread, that's where we fit. And there's a need for it.
May I ask you, this is an unusual request, may I ask you to flip through your slides so quickly that really all I can read is the headline, so I can say digital twin. Okay, got it.
Now we have a cyber digital twin.
Don't explain them. I just want to see
Yeah.
like the progression of your conversation. How it. So
Yeah.
next slide. Next. Yes, I mean next slide, please. Vulnerability management, compliance, continuous monitoring. Okay, next. Okay, this is saying if you have any of these 5 things, we can help. Might have missed the president, but there are there.
Oh, do you want to go back there?
No. It's my friend Paul. While you were talking, I specifically wrote him and said you might want to be on this call, and he's asking a question because he's probably got a lot of tryptophan in his system right now.
I think we all do.
Yeah, actually, no, my wife really doesn't like turkeys, so
Mine
yesterday,
either.
yeah, usually my Zachary just oops, okay, I just sent Paul back to the land of the attendee because I was meaning to push a different button. He'll be back in a second. I can't blame tryptophan on that. She used to make a turkey breast for me and then like prime rib for the rest of the family, but now that Zachary's at college and like nobody, it's like, can we just have a pork roast? And I'm like, okay, I do like pork. Hello, Paul.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey,
Good.
Paul.
Hi, John.
You are entitled to ask a question that we covered a half hour ago. It's all good. What do you?
My
All good.
apologies. I didn't know. I was not aware this was going on, and I was out hanging out with the horses, and then I get this text. So I said, okay, let me come in and ask.
Nice.
Yeah, I live on a ranch, so in New Mexico, but I am in the logistics space, and so obviously I get it. And I was just Googling cybersecurity, healthcare, while you were talking. And so obviously you're right. I mean, it's a huge risk and concern. Question is, because we're involved with assembly, and this is totally a selfish question. So the devices that you're talking about and the type of security you're creating with the twin, is your value chain offering where you touch whoever you touch, does it include being able to drop a piece of software in the assembly part and firmware to help in the communication and security, or are you strictly creating a platform that then creates these digital images and links back to, so that, I mean, the twins, so that whatever's happening on the device can be mimicked in, or is it after the fact, after the manufacturing process?
So we have got nothing on board. We're completely off board. So nothing is installed in the device. Nothing's installed in the application. Maybe one of the easiest things to do is we'll look at what a digital twin is.
And I, by the way, mentioned, I said, hey, Paul, come on, because you had mentioned supply chain. And those are the 2 words that make me think, oh, Paul should be here. He's my supply chain guy.
Yep.
So can you refresh me? What was do you recall the context in which you talked about supply chain, given that you're not on board?
Yes. So as you're developing the features and everything that's going on in the software, right? So there's a supply chain for the software, meaning you're likely using some open source components. You may be grabbing some third-party libraries. You may be writing some of your own code. That supply chain is everything that's attributing to the final content you're putting onto a device or a mobile app or a backend server.
Yeah, the software supply chain. Yeah,
exactly. And so we work off that release binary. We don't need source code or anything else, which makes it unique where if you come into, I'll just show you what's in one of these. So here's a digital twin, right? So what I've done to get this far is I've taken a release image. It could be a binary file, it could be a container, it could be anything. I've scanned this through our system, and it's going to spit out what we call a digital twin, which is a mix of some general information on the version of it, the hardware, in this case, it's an ARM platform. It's not a microcontroller. It's got some information on the RAM, and then it gives some basic information on the software. In this case, it's a rich OS, so it's got a Linux operating system. It gives you the version, tells you the kernel name, very high level information here. It also talks about the number of interfaces, the number of packages around here. So think of this now is we know the digital twin, we know what ports you're using, whether you've got Bluetooth enabled, whether you got Ethernet ports, we know how it's being used in the field, right? From a high level, we also have a full BOM of the software. We also know what licenses, like open source licenses. So later on, we'll look at compliance. So if you're using open source compliance, you can't have an Apache license with a GPL version 2 license. You can't have those in the same builds. Because we know what's in the digital twin, we can start looking for those things. So we also know cryptography. So this is a very rich digital twin that's just coming from that release binary now. Remember, you release that package, it's going out into the field. We can now tell you what your suppliers have given you from software, what you've written, everything else.
So John, that's really fascinating. At this point, with this information, who's your customer? Is this the device manufacturer?
Yeah.
What about the security, the device security director on the hospital side? You have two sets of customers?
On the SBOM side?
Earlier when Joe was saying, hey, who do you speak to and who understands what you're saying? And you're saying, hey, now there are medical device security officers, right? As an example, or something like that title. On the hospital side, you're maintaining hospital potentially.
No, on the device manufacturer side. Yeah, we're in the devices that are going. So the Medtronic, the Drager, those guys.
Okay, I thought you were trying to go into hospitals to protect those 85,000 units and give them a layer of protection so they can manage security for their customers, their patients.
So that is a discussion that we're starting to have, trying to figure out how, because that space needs a solution as well. But what they've got is they've got,
John, do you know?
Those are going to be more of the onboard, CrowdStrike, the people that are on the devices and listening, and they've got their own network trafficking in there. Mm-hmm. Think of the digital twin again. If we could create a digital blueprint of that hospital, of all the devices there and the vulnerabilities, the rest of the players are mostly on the physical side. They're on the physical device. Where if we could have a blueprint of what is digitally, we could start simulating what might happen, right? We can look at that level. But the key there is we need the software assets that are on the devices that the hospital, they don't make it. They need to go to their vendors and get the embedded software that's on the different ECUs in the CAT scan machines or the EKG machines, like all that stuff. They need to start creating a full bill of what's in the hospital. Mm-hmm. Little different discussion.
I think you mentioned earlier, and thank you, Paul, for leaving your horses and joining us for a little bit.
I didn't know you were doing it today. My bad for being late. I always love these events of yours.
Thank you, Paul.
Anyway,
John, I think as I shared at the top, I record these. This is certainly available for you, but insofar as the kinds of questions that we asked and our relative ignorance might be things that you face, maybe share this with the team, and
absolutely
might give some insight into how to present it, because you bet, Paul, that I think this is a discussion that my network needs to hear, and I leave you smarter than I was this morning, but not smart enough to faithfully and accurately represent your value proposition. I mean, I got some of it, and I can get the transcript and I can massage it. In fact, this type of conversation is the type of conversation I have with a new client. When I start with and why is that, and what, and how, so I can explain it to my mother-in-law. I couldn't do that, not yet. This is just too complex to get right off the bat, and there's got to be a simpler analogy that be like, it's like this. Oh, I see. I don't know what that is yet.
Yeah, no, that's fair, and you're right. I took a lot out of this conversation. It was a great learning experience as well.
I appreciate that. I'm really glad you stepped in. Day after Thanksgiving, everyone's still tryptophaned out. We had a lighter than typical attendance, but I'm really glad you joined, and we should continue this conversation.
I would love it. I'd love it. Come back and take another swing at the plate.
event. Paul writes, if I may, locating who you are speaking to. Oh, okay. He was just offering that, talking about he missed that part of the conversation. He was just saying how targeting who you're speaking with and understanding that in the very beginning, but we did cover that. So fair enough. Oops. John, thank you. I will be in touch. And thank you, those who joined us today. We'll see you next week.
All
Thank
right.
you, John.
Thanks,
Be well.
guys.
All right,
Bye.
goodbye.